Okay guys, so I just want to go over an amp modeler that's sort of been my bread and butter since I was about 14 years old. I got this thing in 2002, 2003-ish, right when it came out. And honestly, it took me about a decade to really figure out all the uses of it. Basically, it was my only rig for, I don't know, probably 10 or 15 years. I was solely using this Vox Valvetronix ToneLab. And as far as the model number, it's sometimes known as the desktop unit. If you look up the manual for it, it just says Vox Valvetronix ToneLab. There's a lot of different models of this. This is the one that I learned on. But one thing that's really cool about this amp modeler is the amount of amp selection you can choose from. And granted, it's not going to get every sound down to a T, but as an approximation, it's a lot of bang for your buck. And if you're a beginner, intermediate, whatever level, this amp modeler is great for designing tone palettes, not only because of the amp modelers, but also because you have all sorts of overdrives, modulation effects, 3 different types of delays, and the delays on this are actually really cool. You'd be hard pressed to find that in any sort of pedal form or amp modeler. There's something specifically cool about these delays on this Valvetronix ToneLab. And the reverbs are really nice. They're nice and big and dark. Getting into the amp modeling section, in no particular order, you've got UK Blues, which is based on, what they said in the manual is that it's based on a rare early Marshall amp that used a Tweed design to, I think it used a Tweed design with a preamp in front of it, and that was like a prototype Marshall from back in the day. You know, next on that, on the list of amp modelers would be the UK 68 Plexi. A lot of you guys know about that for its, you know, the crunch that's been used in a lot of classic rock and, you know, the lead tone as well. It's got the UK 80s, which is essentially a Marshall JCM 800. After that, it's got a JCM 900, which was introduced in the 90s, just had some more gain than the 800. After that, the UK Modern, which I guess to put this correctly, it would just be a Marshall of the late 90s, early 2000s. I'm not exactly sure which exact model. Then we get into sort of like the American amp section, and we start off on the rectifier. You know, it emulates, you know, single rectifier, double rectifier. I'm not really sure if it gets up to triple rectifier, but that's sort of like the looser, high-end Mesa Boogie sound. Then we get into US high gain, and my assumption is the US high gain would be modeled after sort of a Mesa Boogie Mark IV. After that, we got Boutique Overdrive, which is, I guess, like a Class A point-to-point hand-wired amp. In the overdrive section, we've got Boutique Clean, same thing, it's just the clean channel. Then we got Black 212, which, for all intents and purposes, that would be like a Fender Deluxe blackface model. Tweed 112, you know, early Fender sound. And then we've got the Tweed 410, which would be several years later in the early 60s when the Tweed heads, the Tweed Bassman heads came out. That's what that amp is modeling. And then, you know, last but not least, we've got the Vox signature amp models. An AC-15, I do believe they said that was their 1962 model. AC-15 top boost, Then we get into AC30 and AC30 top boost. Between all those, it's a very large spanning template for tones that you can get. You know, obviously it's approximations, but I mean, you can pick this thing up for like $75 to $150. So if that's the case and I can wear headphones when I'm playing it, give me the approximations, because I can just dial in and reamp later. The workflow on this is really one of the main reasons I appreciate it. So we went through the amp modeling features and the specific models, but it's also got cabinets to go along with all those models. You know, I'm not gonna go through all the cabinets, but they basically correspond with the amps that we just talked about. And then you have the option of running no cabinet in the simulation at all, turning it completely off. Now here at the pedal section, it's sort of like a gain stage section with a couple exceptions with like modulation effects added. Really cool compressor, incredible compressor actually, and it's really versatile. It's got attack sensitivity and I think sort of like something that would emulate the ratio. It's got an acoustic setting, which doesn't exactly sound, you know, that special or that cool, but what I find is that it gives you a very nice, crunchy, sort of like crystally high-end sound that you can use for layering. You know, a lot of guitar recording in the studio is layering, and if you need to layer something sort of with a lot of treble to fill out the top end, that acoustic feature is really, 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 really cool. Then we got the Vox wah. That's sort of self-explanatory. You would ideally use the wah with a foot pedal that as an adjunct to this unit. I do have it, and maybe I'll show you how to use that in a later video. And moving on, we've got the auto wah, which sort of is dependent on your picking technique. The harder you pick, the more it activates the wah sound. The lighter you pick, the more subtle the wah will be. A U-vibe, which the only thing I really know about the U-vibe is that it's sort of like a Jimi Hendrix thing. He used that in some stuff. I don't know if it's much different than a rotary, but that's what that is. And it's got a crazy octave function. And, you know, I've actually found that octave function to be useful for generating sort of like non-guitar tones, you know, sort of like a synthy type of thing. You can really go low in the octave range with that octave pedal, and it can give sounds that you would almost find in a keyboard or a synthesizer, especially when you mess with the modulation, the delays, and the reverb. You can really while out with that octave feature. The treble boost, another useful feature. It just provides a lot of gain in the top end. You know, if you just want more bite on your high gain sound, activate the treble boost. Tube overdrive, that's for a tube breakup simulation. Pretty decent, really cool if you mix it right in some of these sounds. Fat overdrive, that's more of an aggressive and really highly saturated overdrive sound when you dial in the fat overdrive. And you can also put that on, you can put these overdrives on top of gain that's already coming from, say, your JCM 800, your JCM 900, or one of your kind of Mesa Boogie emulations like the US high gain or the rectifier. When you add a layer of overdrive that they provide, it gives you even more heavy distortion tones. And like I said, great for the writing process, great for generating your next inspiration. Doesn't necessarily need to be your final tone for your record. It's just good for getting creative. Last pedal feature is the fuzz. You know, what can I say? It's just a really heavy fuzz. I think it's based on a fuzz face. All those overdrives and fuzz really function well. Getting into the modulation section, really cool chorus, and you can control the speed, mix, and the depth with the chorus. Same with the flanger, phaser, tremolo. And I think after 15 years of using this thing, that I actually think I appreciate this rotary more out of any of their modulation section, simply because they added a feature that essentially delays the rotary in a way that would replicate like a real life rotary situation. A real life Leslie cabinet would rotate at a slower level than what could be controlled by, you know, human or pedal. Delay sections, we got the delay, just a classic digital delay at the top. We've got a tape delay or tape echo, and we got a multi-head, which is multiple playheads running at one time. I really haven't been able to find that tape echo in other units. With that being said, you know, I haven't dived super deep into the delay world. If anyone has any suggestions where a good multi-head delay is, just please add that in the comment section. Reverbs, spring, room, and plate, they're all lush, they're all big, and if you know anything about reverbs, those three settings are pretty self-explanatory. And there's all sorts of other functions over here where you can utilize like a MIDI interface, which uses the ToneLab as a MIDI controller. Not going to get into that yet. And then there used to be a feature where you could plug your ToneLab through a lane connection and you could actually download tones off the internet. Never done that. Maybe we'll figure out how to do that later. Let's get into some tones. So I'm going to be monitoring through my headphones. That's how I've really used this amp. I go headphone in and out into a mixing board, straight into a recorder basically. So in no particular order, I'm just going to go through some settings that I think are useful. This viable setting, I'm not exactly sure what it was modeled after, but it's sort of like a really nice wah high gain sound. It's emulating EL34 based amplifier. The viable section we just looked at uses a JCM 900 amp model, an auto wah feature, and the tape echo running at 527 milliseconds. Also uses a spring reverb, relatively low settings for that. Let's look at the Nashville setting. The Nashville setting is using a Tweed 112, so think early Fender, a compressor pedal, and then a delay running at 160 milliseconds. Also a plate reverb. So another Tweed sound that I find useful is the Tasty-Flange sound. That's a Bassman head that they're emulating. Again, we're using a compressor, no delay, just a flanger with a lot of depth, about 7.4 on the depth, and a plate reverb. Just kind of a really cool, for lack of a better way to describe it, a really cool kind of Britpop sound. It's a really usable, really inspiring tone. Here's their Sabbath tone. Let's see what amp they're modeling for that. US high gain. So they're using a Mesa Boogie sound to emulate, you know, the Tony Iommi Laney. That's interesting. The treble boost. You know, Tony Iommi used that specific treble boost that gave him big aspect to his tone. Reverb off, and let's see where the gain's at. Of course, both gains are at 10, the VR gain and then the actual gain. I'm gonna go out on a limb, guys, and one of the cool things I've done with this Sabbath preset is added tremolo to it, and it actually has a really cool lead sound. Let's see what we can do with the tremolo added. While we're on the subject of Black Sabbath, Vox also went ahead and gave us a Mr. Crowley tone from the Ozzy Osbourne solo album. Believe Randy Rhoads was with him during that recording. Let's check out what they did for that. Mr.Scary uses the US high gain, and think Mesa Boogie Mark series for that, whether it be Mark II C+, Mark III, or Mark IV, it sort of lives in that realm. Mr.Scary also utilizes the multi-head delay that I was praising earlier. It's got that running at 339 milliseconds. Really nice, subtle, tasteful delay in this setting. Also, a room reverb at sort of mid-range settings. Let's see what they're doing with this tone. Another one of the more usable tones that I've found in the Vox ToneLab is the Wet AC15. That one utilizes an AC15 for the amp model. It's got a treble boost, running the drive really high on that treble boost so as to really create some bite on the top end. And again, the multi-head delay running at 351 milliseconds. I think there's a reason I'm attracted to these sounds with the multi-head delay. It's just because of those really awesome, rich, dark reverb delay sounds. Another thing I like to do with the Wet AC15 sound is add a lot of gain to it. Let's crank up the gain in that fat overdrive right about 8.7. I think I really like that sound because it's kind of nasally, and I guess I have trouble dialing in that nasally tone in a lot of the amps that I have. Okay guys, so we talked about rotary being my favorite modulation effect in this unit. I've got a preset that I made for a project. It's usually, funk rock kind of thing. Maybe some pop added in, but it's a user preset, and maybe look in the comments below for the settings because I don't have those on hand. And don't worry, we're going to do a whole different episode on dialing in tones with this thing, so you can, create tone palettes, for days. Here's just an example of me using the rotary that I was talking about earlier. That is just absolutely phenomenal. So there you have it, guys. There's a little short demo of the Vox Valvetronix ToneLab. We're definitely coming back to this one. Don't worry, we're gonna go over a lot more settings and things you can do with this unit. We'll put it in front of some amps, and this will be a staple of ours. Till then, take care, have a good one. Wishing you the blue note.